And with that, it's another Saturday morning. Good morning, nerds. We missed you.
Oh, 1 month off, and I can say I'm lazy.
It doesn't take a month off for that to be the case.
It's been a full
month?
It's been a full month.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Jeez.
Yeah. We apologize for being a little late. Unfortunately, Dallas has decided to uproot all of its roads simultaneously.
So is Arlington.
And Arlington. Mm-hmm. Well, at least they're all they're working together to destroy all of the roadways.
So in case anybody needs this tip, between Collins and 360 heading east on I-30, don't do it. Just don't do it. It takes you half an hour to get.
And for
that
those
long,
of you who don't
that
live
far.
here, we're sorry that we just wasted 30 seconds of your time.
No, we're not.
Oh, okay,
No, I'm not.
sorry.
How,
no, we're
we
not.
waste
I have no
hours. We
regrets.
waste hours of these people's time, like bi-weekly. So it's fine. Anybody who tunes into this show deserves what they get.
Oh,
That's
wow.
true. Wow.
Wow, man.
That seems harsh, but I agree with him.
Jeez,
Thank you.
Dude.
On that note, though.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
The thoughts and opinions of Sean Walker.
Are part of Vagabond Nerds and
yeah, whether you
expressed
like
on
it or
this
not.
show.
Yeah. Anyway, but we are joined this week by Nick Redfern.
Yes.
Of Ancient Aliens, and you know what? I already did his interview a couple months back. Go back and check it on YouTube because it's 3 hours long.
Refresh some people's minds.
He's written a ton of books. I think at last count it was almost 40 something, and then if you count in the translations.
Well, how about we ask Nick? Nick,
Yeah,
first
let's
off,
Nick.
how are you doing?
Oh, I'm good, thanks, guys.
Excellent.
What is your current book count up to now?
I'm not entirely sure, but it's in the 40s, I know that.
I love that.
Told
So
you.
many books he can't even remember.
Yes, and of course
That's a true author right there.
He
That's
churns
excellent.
out about 4 or 5 different articles a day
That's true.
on Mysterious Universe.
That's
and,
true. On the blog and everything.
I do 2 a day.
2 a day.
So, anyway, but thank you for coming back on. And this,
Yeah, sure.
And we're sorry for the last time, and we're sorry in advance for this time.
we're sorry in advance for this one.
Every time.
But we want to talk to you about your new Slenderman book. For those of us who are watching us, if you go to our Facebook, I have shared a link to his newest book. Apparently, one of our people already bought it for you, so there you go.
Nice.
Oh, cool.
That's right.
But yeah, it's about Slenderman, and for some of our viewers who may not be as familiar with Slenderman, can you fill us in? Where does he come from?
Well, the Slender Man, it's a strange story because people claim to have seen the Slender Man in the real world, even though it was actually created for the internet just roughly or almost a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
The story goes back to 2009 and an online competition or contest, if you like, established by the guys at the Something Awful website to see who could come up with sort of the creepiest creature, if you like, for the internet era. In other words, it was who can come up with something like the internet's version of Freddy Krueger mixed with Michael Myers, etc., etc.
Yeah,
And, and a lot of people entered this competition with artwork and names for their creatures. But the one that really captured everybody's attention was one that a guy named Eric Knudsen created. And he created the name and the image of the Slenderman. And for people who don't know, the Slenderman kind of looks a bit like one of the Men in Black. He's sort of like tall, pale, black suit, white shirt, black tie. But his face is completely faceless. There's no eyes, no nose, no mouth, no ears, just little vague shadows where they should be. And he's got these octopus-like tentacles that sort of wave around from his back. And the image of the Slenderman, as I said, was the one that really captured everybody's attention. And literally within days, you had forums and chat rooms established in the name of the Slenderman.
Wow.
People were writing their own short stories. People writing their own stories, short stories about the Slenderman and putting them on like Amazon Kindle.
So Nick,
that was followed. What's that?
So Nick, let me ask a question, right? So you're talking about that it was done in days, right? Now we're all used to this world of the internet where everything, if something catches fire, it's going to catch fire really fast. Mm-hmm. Is that what we saw with this? Is that something that just exploded, or was it just a general like because they were like, oh my gosh, we can do this?
Oh no! I mean, it really took off massively. Where you had literally tens of thousands of kids and teenagers to begin with that were sort of fixating on this, and after you had the chat rooms and the forums and etc. and blogs set up. Then there was an online show called Marble Hornets, which was like a found footage type. Not a movie. It was like a series of episodes going on, literally dozens of episodes, which you can still watch it on YouTube. And it sort of tells the story of the Slenderman, although in the Marble Hornets one, it's called The Operator rather than the Slenderman. Now, that went on for months and months like that, where you literally had, just as I said, hundreds of thousands of teenagers, kids, focusing on this, and then from there, if you look at the number of hits that if you just type in Slenderman, that there are literally like millions of hits. Just
from people searching the internet, just trying to find out what they could find. Is that just from people searching on it, from getting its popularity and such? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Now, that went on like that situation for probably 4, 5, 6 months. And then after that was when people claimed to start seeing the Slenderman in the real world.
Nick,
talking about people sort of looking out their bedroom window in the middle of the night and seeing him lurking outside the window.
But that's really fascinating. So, I don't mean to cut you off. That's really fascinating. Within the span of 2 to 4 months, you said, what was started as nothing more than an internet contest to see who could create, like you said, kind of the scariest, newest sort of Freddy Krueger thing. Within 2 to 4 months, all of a sudden, people are claiming they see this thing in the real world.
Yeah.
So when we ended our when we ended our show last time with you, the last episode we had you on, we talked about, I think we kind of touched on what was it, Jason? You said Thoughtform.
Thoughtforms, yeah.
Okay, is this so is this basically the same thing is this that in action here? Are we seeing Thoughtform, and if we are seeing the Thoughtform itself, do you think that it's possible that this creature that somebody created is just a contest, to win an internet contest, actually may or may not exist based on Thoughtform?
Yeah, I think that's my personal theory, is that we're dealing with a thought form or multiple thought forms of the Slenderman. And for people who don't know what a thought form is, it's the English terminology for what in Tibet is known as a tulpa, Tulpa. And basically the idea of the sort of the Tibetan people, the concept is that if you focus your mind enough and deeply and intently on one particular thing, and you get your mind almost into an altered state, if you like, and you focus on it, and let's say it's not just you, but there's thousands of other people all focusing on this particular one issue, that the human mind can create sort of a construction in the mind, in the imagination. But then when you have this, almost like this hive-like concentration of tens of thousands of people, that you can then externalize that image in the imagination, and it takes on its own independent supernatural life form, if you like. And the more that people focus on it, the more sort of physical it becomes. It becomes self-aware,
right,
and it breaks free of the minds of the creators, and then starts to turn the tables, if you like. So that's the basic concept of a thought form. The idea that the human imagination constructs these images, and they're so powerful and so many people involved that it projects this thing outwardly, and then it becomes like an independent entity of its own.
It's almost like it's a blank slate for a free-roaming, unnamed, uncharacterized demon, right? And I know that's probably a little more far-fetched out there than what some people are thinking. They're like, Ray, what the hell are you talking about? But, I've got, along those lines, I've always had this kind of thought process behind that. There are these evil entities that walk, and they're just waiting for something to give them shape, right? And along with what you're saying, and so for me, I would feel like, let's say this thing actually did become form, right? Then that's what we're seeing is something that's already existed, just happening to take that form. Is that a theory that's possible? Am I just recovering from too much drinking last night?
No, I mean, there's actually various theories for what's going on. One is the idea that, the thought form angle. Now, the other theory is that sort of supernatural, demonic entities, however you want to term that want to get their claws into us, may take on the image of the Slenderman as a means to sort of reel people in, particularly, kids and teenagers. The image that they're all interested in, fascinated by. What better would there be way for some of these dangerous supernatural entities to sort of reel them in, with a perfect way. But then there are other theories as well, because you can look throughout history and find stories of sort of tall, skinny, supernatural beings. For example, in Germany, they have the history of one that's known as Der Grossman. And again, throughout history, around the world, you can find stories like this. So one of the other theories is that this image of this sort of dangerous, tall, shadowy, skinny figure is kind of embedded in the subconscious of everybody. And so maybe, although Eric Knudsen created the Slenderman, the theory is, well, if that kind of image is embedded in our subconscious, maybe he didn't sort of solely create it, but his subconscious kind of
like he
prompted along as well.
Like he was basically drawing, like what Campbell would call, I guess, sort of a collective fear, right? Or that there's these creatures already exist and we know it instinctively, and basically it's just that his image, the imagery he created, attaches itself to that one primal fear, which is why it took off. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there's a lot of, it gets kind of, I guess, complicated in the sense that there's no clear answers to how and why people are seeing it now. But there may actually, it could be a combination of all those sort of three theories we just discussed. I think it doesn't have to be just one,
Right,
of course.
And I think the thing that even really sort of complicates this particular matter is going back to the original contest that created the Slenderman. The thing that I noticed a lot of people liked was the fact that he created it as sort of a form of fake lore, right? For people who don't know, fake lore is sort of like fake folklore. Was that he didn't just take normal pictures; he went and found a bunch of photos from different eras and inputted him in there, giving it sort of the appearance that this thing has been around for years. But now you're saying that these reports go back for centuries, and so now
you can find stories going back centuries of very similar things. But I mean, when you look at Eric Knudsen's creation, when you said sort of fake lore, it wasn't sort of a case of him faking it to deceive people.
Oh, no, yeah.
Part of like a contest to see who.
Correct. Yeah, no, but he did it as sort of a story where he sort of created this past for it.
Yeah,
that's the intention.
Like a story to go with it. It wasn't just creating the artwork. And saying, here's a bit of cool artwork. But he sort of photoshopped some pictures with the Slenderman in the background. And there were some people who almost immediately said, "Well, hang on, what are we looking at? Are we looking at just something that's fiction, or is it real?" And so you did have that angle start to develop quite quickly, where the lines between reality and, well, is it just a story, kind of became blurred.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. Years before Slenderman became a thing, there was an artist that I had spoken with years ago, and he once told the story that he was working like 2 a.m. right, drawing these aliens and creatures and ghosts and stuff for some artwork that he was working on. And he got this weird feeling, and he turns around and looks out his window and sees...
You looking at him? I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
Well, clearly he saw me watching him, but but outside of me. Yeah, he explained it as sort of like, almost like an alien gray, right? But very long, and he said that his arms and neck and everything was just very elongated and almost octopus-like. He didn't say it was wearing clothes, but it was sort of like crouched down watching him draw. and he felt that his artwork either manifested it or called it, but it watched him, and then once it realized it was being seen by him, it left. So, and again, his description overall, like I said, it had eyes, but in many ways it does reflect Slenderman. So I think this kind of goes back to that concept of maybe Slenderman being a reflection of something that already sort of existed.
Yeah, it's just taking form now that we've given it enough energy to kind of manifest itself.
Now, recently, and unfortunately I haven't had a chance to read your book yet. I've been a little busy at work, but...
Excuses.
We both of you, neither of you read the book either, so screw off. But there were some girls, some young teenage girls who assaulted and tried to murder their friend at a sleepover to appease Slenderman. What happened there?
Well, I mean, although the Slenderman phenomenon from 2009 onwards had this huge following, even though it was a large following, outside of that following, most people weren't really aware of the whole situation of the Slenderman. They hadn't heard of it at all. But that all changed in May 2014, when two young girls, as you mentioned, attacked and tried to kill one of their friends or former friends. And this occurred in the city of a small city of Waukesha, called Waukesha, which is a part of a suburb of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And what happened on the morning of Saturday, May the 31st, 2014, was that two young girls, Anissa Weir and Morgan Gazer, they attacked a friend of theirs, Peyton Leutner, in a wooded area of a local park. And Peyton Leutner was stabbed 19 times, and it's incredible that she actually survived, which she did. And fortunately, the emergency services were quickly on the scene because somebody reported seeing the girl.
Yeah, this occurred in the forest. Did they basically walked outside somewhere and she crawled herself back to the road, if I'm not mistaken?
A game of hide and seek.
Right, a game of hide and seek is how they started this. Is that right?
Yeah, it was like it wasn't so much a forested area, it was a wooded area.
A wooded area, yeah, I'm sorry, pardon me, wooded area.
Where there was like a dense area of trees.
Right,
and,
okay.
So the two girls fled the area after they'd stabbed her, or the one girl stabbed her. And, but they just assumed that Peyton Leutner was going to die. And she didn't. She managed to crawl to a pathway in the park, and a guy on a pedal bike, happened to come by and quickly called the emergency services, and they got her to the hospital, stabilized her, and she's now fully back to normal, physically and psychologically. But the two girls, they sort of quite literally hit the road to head off to another area of forest where they believed that the Slender Man had this sort of creepy mansion and they were going to live with him forever. Now, the police quickly caught up with her, and when they took her, they were taken into custody and questioned. The girls said that they had to sacrifice their friend because if they didn't, the Slender Man would come after their family. And they said that by killing Peyton Leutner, which fortunately did not happen, they said they would have become the Slender Man's proxy. That was the words they used. And they full on believed in the existence of the Slender Man.
Yeah, that's some very high level kind of occultist stuff for a couple of these girls were 12, 13, 10, somewhere around there.
Yeah, 12.
Yeah,
12,
that's awfully young to be talking about proxies for a supernatural entity.
Well, and that one of the things that you just said. Sorry, Sean. One of the things you just said was to go and live with him in his mansion.
Yeah,
like that's something I did not hear.
Yeah.
When following the story, is there more elaboration on that? Like, what was this area or this place that they wanted to go to with him? Like, was that his home? Was his dwelling?
Yeah, that's how they saw it. I mean, this is actually part of one of the aspects of the story that, for the most part, people report in a lot of the stories, the Slender Man seen lurking in the woods and the forests. Mm-hmm. And one of the developments in the story was that if you knew where he lived, he had this creepy old mansion, sort of covered in moss and vines and overgrown trees, and that's where he lived. And the two girls went looking for it. But if you watch some of the police interviews, which are now being released, it's clear, that they full on believed this. This was not like a ploy to, sort of evilly kill their friend and claim to be crazy. They full on believed it. Now, when this happened, and the media, not just the local or even the nationwide media, but the world's media actually picked up on this. Suddenly, the Slenderman became big news, and there was a big following, on the part of the media in relation to how the court case developed. Now, the two girls, that they weren't sent to prison because of their age and their sort of psychological states, but they will be, sort of in secure facilities pretty much until they'll be in sort of late middle age. That's how long they're going to be away for.
I mean, we talk
somebody
about
didn't hug somebody enough.
Right?
That's all I gotta say.
We talk about this and their psychological state to be, I don't know what's the best way to say this, I guess corrupted at such a young age by whatever it was that did this. I mean, is this, obviously the quick lesson that everyone's going to want to point to is, hey, you got to monitor what your kids are doing at all time, which is true, right? As a parent, I can sit there and say, yeah, I want to make sure that my kids are never doing something that I'm not pleased with or that I think could lead them down a wrong path. But at the same time, to be so convinced and convicted within their own minds that this actually is existing, is that, like, as the cops were doing the interviews, did they, have this compassion for the girls, or was it more of a fear on their part for not knowing what these girls believe in?
Well, I think from the police's perspective, they just handled it as an unusual, unusual but straightforward attempted murder. That's how they viewed it. But they brought up obviously the issue of the Slenderman because they wanted to determine the motivation. But the police never kind of went down the pathway of, specifically addressing the possibility of supernatural angles.
Yeah.
That's not,
right.
That's not, right. Part of the
no, they had a murder weapon. Yeah, they knew.
Purely the facts, the data, why did you do it, etc. And in relation to the why did you do it, that's when the story of the Slenderman came out. So they had to get all the information down on the Slenderman to understand what the girl's motivation was. But it wasn't investigating, a paranormal event from their perspective. It was, looking just at all the data more than anything else. But one thing that didn't surface in the court case, and I'm not surprised it didn't, because again, it's not the part of the court to deal with this. But one of the interesting things is that there are actually very similar reports to what the girls claim to have, interacted with the Slenderman in that very same town of Waukesha, but years earlier. For example, I interviewed a guy for the book named Mike Huberty, and Mike had an encounter in Waukesha in an area of forest back in the 1990s with a tall, skinny, dark-looking figure in the woods, which clearly not human, like 7 feet tall and spindly like an insect. And he saw this in the 1990s, just a couple of miles from where the girls attacked Peyton Leutner. Now, if you go back to 1921, the body of a young boy was found in a local pool in Waukesha. And when the police found his body, they found that his clothing was sort of very expensive clothing that he was wearing. And he was never, ever identified. But because he was wearing this expensive clothing, he only looked to be about 6 or 7. The police and the media referred to him as Little Lord Fauntleroy after there's a story of that title, and in the story the boy is like this very sort of posh, wealthy little boy. So that's where the nickname came from. Now, as I said, his body was found in a pool in Waukesha. He was never identified. He still hasn't been identified. But a psychic was brought in at one point to look into the case, and she said that in her mind she could see this tall man in a black suit carrying the boy through the woods. And this was like 3 miles from where, this was 1921, and it was 3 miles from where the two girls attacked their friend in 2014. So you've got a lot of weird stuff that sounds eerily like the Slenderman in the same town where the attack occurred, but decades earlier, 2 decades with Mike's story, and almost a century ago with this little boy.
Yeah.
A quick question, because the kids saying that they were going to go to his mansion, like that really resonates with stuff that I've read, from witches in the Middle Ages. You have these legends. So here's my question, and it's sort of along, I guess, sort of the same way Ray was sort of asking, but more specifically, did the girls say where they obtained this concept? Like, did they say they went to a particular website and got this information, or did they claim to have direct contact with the being? How did they? I think this goes back to how elaborate this story is that they're relaying. I mean, that's a high level occultic, sort of philosophy and theology that they're spouting. Where have they ever claimed where that came from?
Well, I don't think they ever claimed on specific issues, but I mean, it was clear that the reason why they were so into all this was because, like so many other kids, they followed the story and all the developments to a massive degree. It's kind of like somebody researching the history of the Roswell incident. You dig enough into it, all the aspects of the story of Roswell. That's basically what the kids did, the 2 girls did. They became obsessed with the Slenderman story and followed every aspect and every development of it.
And so perhaps they generated this on their own?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, you can make the case that they both became sort of, to a degree, unhinged psychological states, and that caused it. But when you look at the fact that there were some eerie, weird parallels with these earlier cases, and each of those earlier ones was only a couple of miles away from their attack, you have to wonder: is there something more going on rather than just 2 girls who blurred fiction and fact to a terrible degree?
And was this, so you're saying it's something that we don't see, of course, brought up on the media, but was this brought up in the court case as well with witnesses on any of this? To sit there and say that there was something?
Not in relation to anything that might suggest any kind of supernatural thing. It was
Gotcha.
basically, it was a study of the case, why the girls did it, what they believed, and then what's their state of mind. Those are primarily the key issues that were addressed. And it was pretty much that which dictated, that they should be in secure facilities for, till whenever they're released. But the court case basically, said the results were that the 2 girls would be, away well into middle age.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, that's wild.
I believe it was to 53 on one of them and 40 on the other?
Yeah.
Oh, the accomplice.
Sort of late
yeah.
40s, early 50s. And the reason why there was a slight difference is because although both girls were perceived as, launching the attack, it was only the one girl who actually did the stabbing. The other one just stood back and watched.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I would see that much of a difference between the two, but that's me. So, okay, does anybody else have any other questions about Slenderman before moving on? Because I'm starting to get a little depressed here.
Well, I wanted to.
Kids trying attempted murder of children.
So, okay, I don't even remember. They did the whole. They're doing the whole Slenderman movie. That's already released? When did that release?
Yeah, I think the movie's already come out.
It's come out. Yeah.
I think the movie's out, but I think because of this case, it was delayed. I think this movie had actually been shelved.
I thought it was delayed for a little while
bit.
as a result of this. That's why I wasn't sure when it came out. But did you find any? I mean, is it coincidence that they were doing a movie along the same time that Nick, that you were also putting together all your information along for this book? I mean, is that just kind of happenstance, or was it popular enough in the media that it found its way into both of your worlds, the movies and yours?
Yeah, it actually was just purely one of those coincidences because the publisher, New Page Books, they asked me, they said, we're looking for someone to do a book on the Slenderman phenomenon. It's coming up to in 2009, which will be the 10th anniversary of its creation. And so I said, yes, I know quite a bit about it. And then it was actually after that I, when I started researching, then saw that, a movie was in the works and so on. But I mean, what's interesting is that, that when we talk about things like the tulpas and whatever, and these thought forms, in relation to the Slenderman, in the process of sort of doing this research, one of the cases that I pulled up, not in relation directly to the Slenderman, but a perfect example of how thought forms might come to life, revolves around a guy named Alan Moore. And I don't think you've heard of Alan Moore.
Oh, absolutely.
We're familiar with him.
We're familiar.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, Alan Moore, as you may know, he created two well-known characters, one being V from V for Vendetta, which was made into a big movie, and also he created the Constantine character for the Constantine in the comic books, and also the movie with Keanu Reeves. Now, Alan Moore has gone on record of stating that when he was creating the Constantine character, he was visualizing his mannerisms, his appearance, his face, his hair, his build, his character, and focusing on it a lot to try and come up with sort of the perfect image for the art crew. And he said that at the height of all this, when he was putting the imagery together, one particular day he was having lunch in a restaurant on the River Thames in London, England, and he said that he saw coming towards him, striding just right towards him, the literal image of Constantine as he envisaged him coming towards him with this kind of conspiratorial, almost sinister grin on his face, and clearly locked eyes with Alan Moore, and then continued walking on with this sort of slightly sinister grin on his face. And Alan Moore has gone on record as saying he didn't know what to do. Should he follow him or not? And he decided just to sit there. But that sounds very much like what's happened with the Slenderman, that you have Alan Moore focusing on the image, refining his character, his appearance, his clothing, his style, and then suddenly he appears briefly.
Right.
It's interesting that happens in London. When you mentioned that, my mind went back to an interview with a friend of, I can't believe I just forgot his name, John Lennon. Sorry. I was in an interview with a friend of John Lennon, and
because it's music and you don't know it.
Oh, bite me. Anyway, but they had gotten to the question about, hey, there's that story about John Lennon, being given the name the Beatles in a vision, right? And so they were talking to him for a little bit, and he said, well, let me tell you this story. And he starts telling these stories of different people having different encounters in London and in Liverpool, and basically just weird manifestations of people wearing, maybe older clothing, manifesting and walking in, having sort of this very sinister feeling. So I guess the question is it maybe also a combination of location and thought? Like, is it maybe not just like, if you're bopping around somewhere in Texas, it's not going to happen. But if you go to maybe that one place in
like a concentrated energy spot,
concentrated energy spot, maybe a ley line thing. So maybe
there you go. There you go.
So maybe England has more ley lines, so these things manifest more easily. And then again, it was Wisconsin, where these children, is that maybe what's going on?
Well, I definitely think that the setting and the mood has a big bearing on this, because, it's not just like somebody sitting down and reading sort of a 6-page short fictional story on Kindle about the Slenderman. You find a lot, for some weird reason, unlike a lot of other sort of paranormal entities that you can find, the Men in Black, the Black-Eyed Children, the Shadow People, things like this, for some reason, the Slenderman, more than any other, has captured people's imaginations, and to a deep degree. So I think sort of the setting, the mindset, the location, if you live close to like spooky woods and forests and you're into the paranormal and your mind starts to run, and et cetera, that is, I think, is far more likely to be conducive to creating a thought form than, let's say, if you live I don't know, in a multi-story penthouse in New York or something, because the atmosphere and the vibe isn't necessarily going to be conducive to perfect creation, if you like.
Right.
If you live, in sort of a spooky old town with a history of this and that, and some old house on the hill, that kind of thing, I think that kind of inspires, if that's the right term to use, people to become more aware or to focus more onto these kind of things, because they've got an atmospheric environment to start with,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. We're coming down to the last 10 minutes of our...
Actually, we're not.
We're not?
We're not.
Okay.
We've got about 20 minutes left.
Okay,
Oh,
we got
good.
20 minutes left.
Sweet.
No, okay, plenty of time. Does anyone else have any questions, because I would really like to ask him about the Black-Eyed Kids thing that he just mentioned.
Go for it.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's do this. So, Nick, final thoughts on Slenderman as far as what we think it is or what we think it could possibly be.
Well, I kind of lean personally towards the Thoughtform angle, but as I said, there are other multiple theories. The idea of supernatural beings taking on the image of the Slender Man as a means to sort of reel people in, particularly people who are potentially, easy to manipulate and control. Or it could be, as we said, archetypal images of tall, skinny, dangerous creatures could be sort of embedded in our subconscious, in our DNA. And so, from time to time, they surface. Or it could be a selection of theories like that.
Yeah.
But where it's all going, I mean, as I said, that the one thing that is sort of disturbing is the fact that people become obsessed with it. Unlike a lot of other phenomena, it's not like, people just have an interest and, wow, this is intriguing, I'll read about this. With the Slender Man, it's almost always the case that the interest becomes an obsession. And nobody's really had a good or offered a good explanation why things should sort of go along horizontally and then suddenly go vertically, where it suddenly changes and it starts to rule and control their lives. And in some cases, I've spoken to the people, they did become obsessed. They put their sort of private life and social life on side because, they had to do research into the Slender Man, things like that. And
That's wild, man.
And I think sometimes, when you start to cross that line, then it can become dangerous. And as it always does, but it can become dangerous. But the big question is, why does it happen so much with the Slender Man? Why have there been so many attempted killings and bad news and bad luck, which doesn't, relate to if somebody writes a bunch of stories about vampires or Frankenstein's monster, but it keeps happening in relation to the Slender Man.
Yeah, I can't recall anyone ever trying to sacrifice anybody to Spider-Man. So,
No,
I mean,
exactly.
Not on purpose.
Not on purpose, yeah.
I've thought about choking you with the web or two, Jason.
Well, that's for other reasons. Anyway, so for those who may not know, the Black-Eyed Kids are a phenomenon where...
Spinoff of the Black Eyed Pea group?
Yes, it's a spinoff of the Black-Eyed Peas. Fergie's solo project. No, but basically people report, and it started mostly in the 90s, where people started seeing these kids, usually at night, but not always, but they would come up and talk. They would have a weird manner of speech, weird clothing, but their eyes were solid black. Mm-hmm. And they seemingly had telepathic abilities, or at least the abilities to influence the person they were talking to. And everyone who's, at least that we who's come forward, describes them as being almost predatory, and having that very predatory vibe. What have you found in this? Like, how long has this been going on? Is it something that just started in the 90s, or does it go back further?
Well, I mean, that's a good question, because publicly, at least, the phenomenon kicked off in the latter part of the 1990s. It actually began with a Texas journalist, a guy named Brian Bethel, in Abilene. And he had this creepy encounter late one night. He'd got a bill that he'd forgot to pay, and so he went to like a local drop-off place near his home where he could just deposit the envelope with the check in it, so he wouldn't get into problems. As he pulled up and he put the check in, he was getting ready to drive away. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, there were these two kids standing by the car. And he was sort of startled because they came sort of literally from nowhere. And he found the whole thing, it was almost like a weird, creepy, theatrical play where they said that, they went up, which is the typical scenario. They sort of ask questions, can we come in? We're lost, we're homeless, can you give us some food? And they tried to find a way to get into the car, but having him invite them into the car, which kind of parallels the old vampire legend.
Right,
They have to be invited in.
Right.
And Brian Bethel said that he got this really weird feeling that he should not open the door, but to his horror, he could see his arm going towards the door to open it. And then he kind of broke out of this sense of almost like mind control that he was under, and he suddenly looked closer at the kids and saw that their eyes, the entire eyes, were just totally black. And he just hit the accelerator and drove off. Now, we don't really know when the phenomenon began, because Brian's story was the one that got everybody talking, and people started to come forward and saying, well, I saw something like that or identical, but I didn't want to talk about it for what people might say. And some of those people who came forward claimed that their encounters occurred in like the 1960s and the 40s, or their grandmother saw one in, the 1800s, that kind of thing. So it's hard to say how far back it goes in terms of the history, but in terms of the story starting to surface, it was in sort of the late 90s, mainly because, as I said, people were reluctant. It's like a lot of things in life. Most, people don't do anything until somebody else does,
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I've heard many stories of these kids literally manifesting out of nowhere. Like they're there, like you turn your head and they're gone, and then they're there.
No, that's just your kids, man. That's my kids too. We're parents, but I mean that's what happens.
That's how kids work.
Yeah.
But are
Kids
there
are ninjas.
They really
Exactly.
are.
Are there stories of black-eyed adults?
That's a good question. There are a few, but there aren't anywhere near the level that people talk about with the black-eyed children. I've got maybe 5 or 6 cases of, if that, maybe 3 or 4 of black-eyed adults. I've got somewhere in the region of about 40 cases of black-eyed children. And David Weatherly, who wrote a definitive book on the subject,
Yes.
I'm sure David's probably got hundreds by now, But what's interesting is that the appearance of these kids, not only do they have sort of black eyes, but their skin is sort of like white, like milk white. And some of the witnesses, when they've seen them close up, have said their face almost looks like plastic, like smooth plastic or rubber, that kind of thing. It doesn't look like normal skin.
Like real
And as I said,
skin.
they always sort of try and find a way to be invited in, whether it's in the car or into the home, and they use the same lines over and over again. We're hungry, we're homeless, we're lost, can we come in and use the phone? And it's that invite that sort of chills the people, because they keep demanding that you've got to say, you've got to let us in. And it's a very strange phenomenon, but there are cases where people have seen the black-eyed children close up, and then within a day or two, they've fallen very sick, as if they've been somehow like supernaturally infected. There's quite a few cases like that.
And wasn't there a story? I can't remember where it was. I want to say it was Arizona or Texas, where a mother went into a little supermarket thing to grab eggs or milk real quick, and she left her child in the car. Car was running. She comes out, and one of them is in the car with her child.
I'm not sure how that story ended, but that was a very weird one. I guess, the kid was just trusting because it was another little kid, it didn't seem
Right.
as a danger. But
That's creepy.
there are cases like that. Now, when people are in very close proximity to the black-eyed children, another thing, not just like falling sick, but people sometimes report a brief period of just sort of like weakness, and as if their energy has been sort of literally drained from them. And in some cases, it's sort of lasted for minutes or hours. In a couple of cases, for days, as if one witness described it as how you might feel like a diabetic, if they've missed breakfast and lunch, and then at 9 o'clock they start to get the shakes, and feeling weak and etc. And that's how some of the witnesses have described it, as if somehow the goal of the black-eyed children is literally to sort of feed on our energy levels, if you like, on our life force, which is, ties again with the vampire angle to it.
Yeah.
Question, because obviously there are some similarities between these black-eyed kids and the Men in Black and Women in Black.
Because they both have the word black in it. That's not a similarity, dude.
No, but the way Men in Black speak, their pale, sort of non-human skin, all seems to be very similar. Is there a connection to this, or do we not have enough information to know?
Well, I actually think there is a connection. I don't think it's as simple as, they're the kids of the Men in Black. I don't think it's that. I think these phenomena are connected because, most people, if you mention the Men in Black, they'll think of Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, working for this sort of secret agency. But if you speak to, I would say, a good 95, 96% of all the witnesses to the real Men in Black, they describe them as not looking entirely human. They're very skinny, pale. They wear these black suits. Sometimes they're like really tall, which sort of parallels the Slenderman angle as well.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing.
They often wear these wraparound sunglasses, which almost look like ski goggles. And when people have said they've got close to them, they've seen that their eyes aren't black, but they look abnormally large, as if they're bulging out, and that they're wearing these sunglasses or these goggles almost to hide the fact that they don't look entirely human. So, and again, there's this angle of the skin looking weird. People have said that when they were looking at them, what was eerie was they couldn't tell how old they were. It was all, it's like they were aged less. Sometimes you see somebody like that, you think, are they 50 but they look 30, or vice versa, you know what I mean? And,
yeah.
And that's how people have described it, that they don't seem to have any kind of features that would give away their age. It's just everything's smooth and blank.
Now, I've heard stories of people talking, again, going back to the odd language of the black-eyed kids, where they would say things like, "Do you have food? Is it time for food?" That the Men in Black have a very similar sort of cadence where they will ask or say weird things like, "I'm running low on energy," or something like that.
There are a lot of weird things where typically, the Men in Black, the one thing that is similar to the movies is that, they do threaten people who've had paranormal experiences, not just UFOs. So that is true. But a lot of people have said that when the Men in Black are sort of reeling off this threat and this warning, they said some of them suspected that it was as if the Men in Black didn't actually know what they were saying, but they were just sort of doing it parrot fashion. Imagine, for example, if somebody gave you, a 2-minute speech in, let's say, Russian. You could listen to that over and over again, and you could eventually, you'd remember, you'd be able to say it, but you wouldn't necessarily know what you were saying, you know what I mean?
Right.
And people have said that's how they felt with the Men in Black. It was almost like a program, as if the Men in Black were programmed to make this statement about having seen this and don't talk about that. So, there are these weird aspects to it, like with the same way that the black-eyed kids always keep trying to find ways into the house, using the homeless angle, we're hungry. The Men in Black do the same thing in the sense that it's they threaten people, but it's both groups, if you like, use their own ways and means to get their grips into the person.
Like they're both being emotionally manipulative, from their sort of angle, but they don't understand the emotional meaning of what they're actually saying. Like you said, just a script.
They are like almost like a biological robot. Or interestingly, some people take the view that because the witnesses very often to the Men in Black and the black-eyed kids describe how at the time it was almost like they were in a weird dream world, as if they were like a waking dream. And some people think that the whole MIB and black-eyed kid experience occurs in like a real-world Matrix type environment, that these entities construct some sort of sophisticated imagery, and that if somebody else was looking through the window into the house, maybe they just see the person there in kind of like a trance on the couch, and with nobody else there at all, no kids, no men in black.
Like it's a purely psychic
and
experience.
It's just like a projection in the mind that some sort of supernatural power dictates.
Right, like it's not necessarily a vision per se, but it is a real event that's really happening, but it's happening in the mind of the victim.
Yes, but we don't know how or why these entities are constructing these sort of highly sophisticated, temporary matrix-type environments.
That's interesting.
So basically, it's happening in more of a subconscious or maybe of a dream state type,
or
altered
state.
Or altered state. Think they're dreaming. They're not dreaming in the sense that they just had a bad dream.
Right.
It's far more than that. But it's intriguing, the possibility that we're dealing with something that renders the mind into such a graphic, realistic-looking environment that, as I said, this interesting theory that if anybody else was there, they might not see anything at all other than the person just looking totally zonked out or zombified.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
Or drunk and passed out.
Yeah. Ray knows about that. Now we're coming down to the last 5 minutes.
For real this time.
Way to keep an eye on that clock there, Scooby.
Well, I was, but yeah, I'll yell at you later.
All right.
So I guess is there any last thing you'd like to talk about? Anything maybe
you'd
that
like
you
to
have coming
promote?
up?
Yeah. Anything you want to promote?
Well, I've actually got a book coming out next month in September called Paranormal Parasites, which looks at this idea of supernatural entities sort of using us as a form of
food,
if you like, almost.
Nice.
And there's quite a bit in there on the black-eyed children and things like the shadow people, which again, people who have these experiences and encounters where they feel weak afterwards, as if they've been drained of energy. So that comes out next month, and I'll actually be speaking on that book and the Slenderman as well at the Mothman Festival on the weekend of September the 15th in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It's a yearly event they have on.
Yes.
And so I'll be speaking there. And if people want to contact me, I have a blog called World of Whatever, which has a contact button on there, and so you can contact me there if people want to share information, or if they just want advice, on an experience they've had, and all the books are all available on Amazon.
Cool.
It's awesome. Nick, I think I can speak for all of us when I say it's always a pleasure having you on the show, and we do appreciate you taking time out to spend with us. Certainly.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Certainly like to get you in studio one time if we can. But
yeah, definitely next time. I'll make it.
Yeah.
Cool.
But if not, I mean, we can certainly kick the crap out of Jason for you if that's what you'd like us to do. We can make that happen.
Hey, will you be at the Jefferson conference this year?
The Bigfoot one?
Yes.
Yes, I will, yeah.
No,
wonderful.
cool.
Awesome.
Neat.
Yeah, we
Okay.
may be there, so I may see you this year.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
All right.
Sounds good.
Well, we appreciate it. For everyone who's watching, do go on Amazon right now and type in Nick Redfern and purchase one of his
And buy all of it.
Yeah, buy one of his 5,373 books.
Right.
Well, Nick,
So-
we appreciate you coming on, bud. We thank you for it, man.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.
Cool.
Thank you, Nick.
Talk to you next time, man.
All right.
All right, see you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
And for the rest of us going out, missed everyone.
Yes.
I think for us, this show's more cathartic for us than it is, I think, for anyone else listening. All six of you guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
We just assume that you've all done something wrong in the past and you're doing this as some sort of penance.
Yeah.
But it's good for us.
Mm-hmm.
So, on that note, please go to YouTube and like and subscribe so you can be notified whenever we actually show up online.
Yeah. Whenever we go live.
Whenever we go live.
Yeah.
And of course, you can like and follow us on Facebook for news, and sometimes we talk about things and share little things and photographs.
Sometimes we're just smart asses.
Sometimes we're smartasses.
Sorry,
Or-
sweetie, I'm trying to cut down on the cursing.
Anyway, or you can contact us at I'm sorry, vagabondnerds at gmail. Yeah, vagabondnerds at gmail.com. And there may be another form of getting a hold of us here coming up soon, but we will let you know next time. Until
and
then,
we will be seeing everyone here in 2 weeks. We're
Yes,
not gonna,
2 weeks. We'll
we're
be
not
back
going
in 2
on
weeks.
vacation anymore,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
promise.
Yeah, summer's
until
over.
then, stay nerdy, my friends.
Oh my gosh.